The things that you invent in your head that are scary. What if someone says, I don't like you? What if someone says, you're not as good as me? The theory of that fear in your head is never going to be as scary. A lot of people will lack confidence because they feel that they can't do the thing. I know I can do the thing. And they were furious when she married my dad. A decision where my mum would look at me and go, that's the right thing to do. Then why wouldn't I do that?
Hello, I'm Heloise Finch. Welcome to Tell Beyond, the podcast that asks extraordinary people to share their unfiltered, uplifting stories from life and business to lift you up and encourage you to rethink what's possible. In this edition of Tell Beyond, I'm talking to someone who has had a career across journalism, marketing and human resources. In her 40s, she had a change of circumstances. The death of a loved one drove Nina to ditch the corporate career, buy into a business and become managing director. Nina Metson, welcome.
Thank you for inviting me.
You come from a family who've made big decisions. Your father emigrated to South Africa. Tell me about that.
I think he was always desperate to escape. He grew up as an only child. He didn't really talk very much about his childhood, but what he did say is that he grew up quite lonely. His father worked away a lot, and I think that academically, school-wise, he was never, particularly interested. He always said that he had to take a pay cut when he left school because he was working so many jobs when he was in school. So he left school, and at a pretty young age, he was still in his late teens. He decided to just disappear and head off to South Africa and start work as a hairdresser. He was working in hotels over there.
What was he leaving behind, do you think?
From what I know, like I said, my grandfather, who I never met, he passed away before I was born, but his father worked in food production during the war and afterwards, spent a lot of time in Ireland. And my dad's mum, my grandma, had a lot of mental health challenges. She wasn't very well. And of course, these things were never diagnosed properly, but, she really struggled. So I think my dad spent a lot of time with his auntie in her pub. The pub's still there. Absolutely need to go and visit at some point. And he grew up in a small village in Wiltshire, and I think that he thought, I don't want this to be it. I don't want this to be it. There's so much more out there. So why not go for it? And I think that that's been a theme his life, and actually then as I got older, my life as well, is like, why not? My parents were actually married for a long time before they had children. They, not by design, my mum was told that she probably wouldn't be able to have children. This was the 70s, there wasn't the medical interventions that there are now, and they were simply one of those unlucky couples that weren't able to have a baby. And then apparently she went in for a treatment for something else, and lo and behold, 2 babies arrived. So we were born in Winchester in Hampshire, me and my brother, 3 years apart. Just all of this time that my parents had been told, you probably aren't going to become parents, and they had kind of set their lives up around that. They'd been married for 10 years or more before we arrived, and then all of a sudden, these little children arrived. If you imagine, we grew up in a little environment where my parents had several shops in the parade of shops. They had the flats above. My grandparents lived on the corner of the street. We lived on the street as well. That was our whole world. So, even when we were really small, my brother and I, we were in and out of all the shops. And, if we were redecorating a flat before a new tenant came in, we were just part of mum and dad's, sort of world that they had with all these different kind of businesses set up. That's my early memories.
Did you see much of your dad as a kid, or was he always working?
Well, this is tricky because I did see lots of him, but I saw lots of my dad in his work environment. So I spent a lot of time in the salon. I would be, as soon as I could hold a broom, I was sweeping up hair. That was the
early
deal.
Apprenticeship.
Very much so. So yes, I did see quite a lot of my dad because we were in and out of the salon, but my dad wasn't then as present in those other aspects. So I can't ever remember my dad being at a sports day or a parents' evening, and perhaps, it's different expectations and different, how you would divide labour. Now there's that desire perhaps for a lot more equality of time and how you spend your time. But then it was absolutely, if we wanted to see Dad, we had to be kind of in his world. He was a hairdresser for his whole career, so making people feel making people feel good about themselves. And I also remember, he ran a salon, again, sort of it wasn't a high-end, although he did work in very high-end salons, but when he set his salon up, it was in a lovely community in Winchester, serving the local ladies, and several generations of local ladies actually, when by the time he finally retired. But obviously he would see some of those ladies through ill health, and he would have some ladies might bring in hair pieces, for example, if they were going through treatments where they had lost their hair. And I vividly remember these ladies that were happy to do so. He'd be working sort of with them, but then he also had like a little model head with the headpiece sat on. He'd be doing that as well, and so he'd be doing these sessions to help people just feel good.
And what was your mum's world? That was your dad's world.
Yeah, so my mum was a hairdresser as well. So they met when my mum was an apprentice, and my dad was managing the salon. So although there was only a few years between them, that my dad had kind of risen up the ranks quite quickly because he was really good at managing and running. And my mum was an apprentice, and she was a hairdresser for her whole career. The way that she always phrased it with me is that she was the keeper of people's secrets. And I know that sounds like quite a sweeping statement, but people talk to their hairdresser about things that they don't tell anyone else. You are therapist, friend. Maybe it's something about the fact that you're not actually looking directly at that person, that you're looking in a mirror maybe. But she would have clients confide in her about things that they might not ever say. And it was her job to be the keeper of those, and to have that, that discretion and the kindness, and, just kind of be present. And very often as well, if you've got those regular appointments with people, it's the regular presence in someone's life as well, because you're going to see that person every week, every fortnight, every month. So you're an important part in people's lives. And mum and dad were whole court. They worked together in the salon, and it was just this flurry, you can imagine, with noise and light and joy. And my dad working, sort of 3 different chairs all at once, and and my mum, sort of running her own clients, but also running the house and running us as kids as well. And it was busy and noisy
and full of people.
And full of people, absolutely.
You said to me previously, and you mentioned just now, your father wasn't good with writing, but also he might have been misdiagnosed or not had diagnosed with dyslexia. But he had his own little empire. He had a business empire. How did that work out? I
think there was some fortune in the fact that this was a pre-digital age. He had an extremely good lawyer, an extremely good accountant, an extremely good hairdressing supplier, and he had my mum.
He built a team.
Absolutely. So, he was there in the centre of it all, and he absolutely played to the strengths of the people that were around him. He knew that his strengths were bringing customers in, keeping customers happy, working fast, working hard, working efficiently. And there was never anything that he asked of anybody that he wouldn't have done himself 5 times over. So, if he was trying to build a business in a modern age where you had to have a social media presence, and you had to have a media plan, and you had to have, content, and all the things that perhaps we do more with, because we've grown up with it as being part of how we talk about our businesses. My dad didn't even have a till. He had a drawer with a stone in it that held the cash and the checks down.
But I bet he knew what was...
The books would always balance, absolutely.
Your dad would have found a social media manager.
To be fair, he probably would have done. Although I don't know if my dad on TikTok, I don't know.
So what were your parents' choices that you wouldn't repeat?
The life that I've built with my husband, so we've been married 21 years, been together for 25 years. We have always, as much as possible, divided everything 50-50. Perhaps we've been quite fortunate in that the jobs we've had, the money we've earned, where we've worked has enabled us to do that. But actually we've been conscious in those decisions around, did I want to take a job in London and therefore be out of the home for much longer days? Yes, the money might be better, but is it the right thing for us as a couple and us as a family? And we have absolutely made deliberate choices around the jobs that we've done, and the way that we've set our lives up so that we have a very equal partnership. And The only struggle that I ever saw was perhaps the imbalance. When you're running 3-4 businesses and all the things that come with that, it's
Where was
7
the
days a
imbalance
week.
with your parents?
Oh, it was in time. It was absolutely in time. You know, my mum was working, but she ran everything outside of that as well. And yet my mum was just as talented. She was an amazing hairdresser. You know, she was just as skillful, and yet she always had to sit in a different role. And I know that there was massive frustrations for her about that. When she was growing up, you know, her parents sent her to boarding school, sent her to a particular school where the aim was essentially to marry the right person. Simple as that. And she wanted to be a nurse. They wouldn't let her be a nurse. That was not a seemly profession for a young lady of her standing. And they were furious when she married my dad. Absolutely furious. They didn't come to the wedding. They didn't attend. So it was my mum's twin brother that walked her down the aisle. And her parents, apparently they did go. Apparently they stood at the end of the churchyard and watched, but they wouldn't go because they were so angry.
They didn't want her to work?
No, they didn't want her to work at all. They certainly didn't want her to marry this scrappy young man with no family, no history, not a qualification to his name, that worked for himself rather than being part of a, you know, sort of a prestigious firm or whatever it might be. I remember my dad also saying that one of the things that really spurred him on was to prove them wrong. So, you know, so perhaps that's where the hours and the work ethic and the long days came from, because he was absolutely motivated by proving everybody wrong.
What did your parents want for you?
They wanted me to not become a hairdresser. They really didn't. They were just like, you have to stand all day. They both had completely ruined ankles and knees. The arthritis in your fingers. So they never had any particular intention or no desire. Although I had to do a lot of sweeping up of hair and making tea and coffee and passing up curlers, they never wanted me to be a hairdresser and take over.
There was no other expectation apart from don't follow us?
No, and never any particular expectation to go to university. I mean, I say this with no badge of honour at all, no one in our family's been to university. It's really just been a case of, what do you love? And if you love it, can you make money at it? Do those things compute? And if you can't make money at it, how do you try and make money at it and then still try and do it in a way that you still enjoy, so that you don't have to completely sell your soul doing something you hate all day?
Is that the type of business and entrepreneurship that your parents stood for? Don't sell your soul? Yeah, definitely. To the very last day, they still took joy. You know, my dad retired when he was 70, so yeah, absolutely, and still had clients up until that had been with him for 40 years. So my mum was a bit younger, and when she retired, she was going out to the homes of clients who could no longer drive or get out of, and there were times when they had to work really, really hard. You know, there was a point in the 80s when they were scammed out of a load of money, and it was really, really hard. I remember hearing some quite fraught conversations, and my mum had to kind of, she was doing the perfume parties, and where you would go out and do all these, trying to earn a bit of extra money, and there were some really hard moments there. But at the core of all of that was still the belief that if you've got a skill, a talent, a trade, whatever, and you make people happy doing it, then you'll be okay. So tell us about the objects you brought in.
I've brought in my dad's hairdressing scissors. Now, I know I've spoken a lot about my mum and dad and their careers and being hairdressers, but it feels like it's so far removed from the job I do, because a lot of what I do now is around knowledge and connection, and this is so tangible.
You've got two pairs.
I've got two pairs of scissors here.
What they are, and
so these are still an extremely sharp pair of trimming scissors. Were my dad's last ones that he would sharpen and keep very nice. And
they've got that little wiggly bit on the finger.
So you can rest your finger in there to. And I almost daren't hold it, because it feels like, that this is like master tools, right? In terms of being able to create beautiful things with them. And even, up until a couple of weeks before he died, he was still cutting my children's hair. So he was still doing their hair with this. And
so there's one pair of trimming
there's
scissors.
one pair of trimming scissors, and then these are thinning scissors. So these are kind of like, they look like two combs. So if you've got really thick hair, this rather will take out sections of hair. That noise, that is one of the noises of my childhood. But the reason that I brought these in is that I was really lucky. We had a lovely childhood. We lived in lovely homes. We lived in a lovely bit of the world. My parents worked so hard to create this life for us. But both of them recognised the fact that even if everything went south and it all went wrong and all the rest of it, if they had these, then we'd be okay, because they had that skill and they had that ability to be able to make something out of nothing. So this is for all of the lovely things that we had in our lives. It all boils down to the foundation of these. Now, the reason I don't have my mum's is because they went with her. There were very few things that she stipulated actually when she in her instructions about when she passed away. But one of them is that she wanted to have her hairdressing scissors with her. She was not to be parted from them.
Thank you for sharing. So you did a journalism diploma.
I did.
And then you went into work. What direction did you take?
So, having wanted to be a music journalist and being obviously absolutely convinced that I would be, sort of chasing pop stars around the world, I then realised that if I was going to be doing that, I'd have to move to London. And this was where my lack of confidence, lack of security around, believing that never been part of the in crowd and all that kind of stuff. I just had an absolute panic at the idea of having to move to London and go and do all those kind of things. So I wouldn't say I settled, but I went to go and work in kind of provincial magazine publications and provincial newspapers.
Why wouldn't you say you settled? What does that mean for you, to settle?
It's a really difficult thing to say, but I've always had this disconnect between ability and confidence. So a lot of people will lack confidence because they feel that they can't do the thing. I know I can do the thing. Yet I don't have the confidence to go and do the thing. And that has often led to a lot of frustration, because there will be an awful lot of people who would be promoted above their ability level simply because they are confident enough to give it a go. Whereas I spent a huge part of my career inhibiting myself, because despite the fact that I could excel and do all the things that were asked of me, I never had the confidence to take that big step or that big leap or stick my head above the parapet or challenge. It was always about, at the time, there was more importance around being liked and accepted than being brilliant.
For you?
Yeah, at the time. So yeah, you throttle back and you hide yourself so that you are more acceptable, palatable, simple, easy,
for who?
Safe for the rest of the world. That you don't challenge, that you don't threaten, that you don't, that you don't cause someone else's discomfort by your own ambition. So you sit in a smaller world that is more easy and comfortable for others.
And for you?
No, because it's really frustrating. It's really frustrating because you look around you and you just think, I could be doing more. I could be achieving more. I could be, whatever it might be. And because you simply aren't brave enough, it's no one else's fault. You cannot put the blame on anyone else, because you're simply not brave enough to go for it. Because of what? Because someone might not like you because of it, because it might not work, because because it feels risky, because you might actually be rubbish at it, and actually, you've told yourself that you're good, but actually you're not, or largely because someone else might look at you and go, who are you to do that? So you don't. You create this.
Were you conscious of thinking all of those things?
Yeah, absolutely. All the time. All the time.
And oftentimes when in careers, people get over that because they have a mentor or a boss or somebody that lifts them up or pushes them up. Or did you have someone in your different career moves that tried to push Nina forward?
Not until I joined Waddington Brown.
It taken that much time?
It took that much time. So I was already in my 40s. So yeah, I was 42 when I joined Waddington Brown. So you think, and I didn't go to university, so you can imagine it's a big chunk of careers. Good, good solid couple of decades of always being the very competent number two, or sort of staying out of the limelight, staying under the radar, staying in an environment where, because the minute I was challenged, or the minute that I was criticised, rightly or wrongly, it would cause such a reaction, such a, oh my goodness me, it must be, I must be terrible, I must be awful, I'm going to get sacked, or whatever it might be. So you just inhibit yourself completely.
Sounds like you were living on a knife edge.
Yeah, it was really stressful.
So what changed when you went to Waddington Brown? What did your boss do for you that hadn't been done before?
So Emma Gunton, who was the managing director of Waddington Brown at the time, she held me accountable, and she wouldn't let me get away with hiding. I was sat on a fee-earning desk. The expectation was that I would be earning fees, hitting a target, and it was by no means as hardcore as perhaps some of the sort of recruitment agencies and other agencies that are out there. But bit by bit, because Emma would not let me duck under. I was present, I was visible. She put me up front at events. I wasn't writing the script for somebody anymore. I was up front and hosting these things. And I was delivering training courses, and I was talking to clients, and I was putting myself in their environment, going into their working. These things were absolutely terrifying for me.
What was worse, the terrifying of that or the frustration of flying under the radar?
Oh, that's a really good question, because the answer is actually it's the frustration that's more annoying. And what I realised bit by bit is that the thrill of talking to a client about whatever their problem is, whatever their frustration is, knowing that you know how to solve that, because either you can do it or you have built this network of connections of brilliant people that could solve it, and then actually going and doing that. Now, there might be elements in that are scary, that are, oh my goodness me, I hope it's going to work out, but they're nothing like as scary, or nothing like as sort of as unpleasant, now that I think about it, as sitting in that little prison that I'd put myself in, that little, very nice, very, I was very well thought of, and it was almost like this little gilded prison where I'd created this little comfort zone for myself, and how lovely, but with no challenge. Whereas now I was absolutely in the thick of it.
So you lost your mother at the end of 2020.
Yes.
And about a year later, Emma, this fantastic mentor and boss, broke some news to you. What did she share?
Yeah, so obviously we'd been through COVID, we'd been through the pandemic, it affected everybody differently, and I think that for a lot of people, it meant it was an opportunity to really think about their life, the work that they were doing, and what did that mean for them for the next 10, 20, 30 years. And Emma, about the end of 2021, she said to me, I think that I'm done. I've loved what I've built at Waddington Brown, but I'm ready for the next chapter of my life. And so what did that mean? So she said, well, I could sell the business, I could close the business. She said, but would you consider buying the business? Now, and again, I remember the conversation. We were sat in the office, just at our desks, just as we would have always been. There was only the two of us in the office. And this question came out of the blue almost. You know, I had no inkling about it whatsoever. There was this moment, and this moment now could have meant that my life went one way or the other way, because something, whatever it was, and it was not, I don't even necessarily think it was a conscious decision, just went, yes, I'll buy the business. With no thought about, I'd never run a business. I'd certainly never run a recruitment business, you know. I had no idea how I was going to finance that. I had no idea what that was actually going to mean. Obviously, I hadn't spoken to my husband about it, and I've mentioned before about the fact that we've always had this very equal relationship and partnership. But there was this bit that just went, yes.
You shared with me previously that the experience of losing someone you love endlessly took you to a place where nothing would ever be so bad. Do you think the two were linked, losing your mum and this happening a year later?
Yes, definitely. If I then have an opportunity to do something where I know this would be a decision where my mum would look at me and go, that's the right thing to do, then why wouldn't I do that? Even though she's not here, both of them still, they're guides, because they got so many things right. So actually to say yes to something like that, say yes and then work it out afterwards.
Either by working at Waddington Brown to start with, or the experiences you had with losing your parents, something changed your interior monologue. Yeah,
it absolutely did. I think that the things that you invent in your head that are scary. So I had avoided doing things before because what if? What if someone says, I don't like you? What if someone says, you're not as good as me? What if someone says, I don't want you to do that piece of work? What if someone says, who do you think you are? The theory of that fear in your head is never going to be as scary as sitting in a room watching your mother die. One is the reality of something that you've actually then got to live with and process. The other is ultimately an invention. And when you are now then faced with choices in life, or when I'm faced with choices in life, is it reality or is it invention? And there's nothing that happens in my life now, the reality of anything that happens in my life now is simply not as scary as
you can see clear. It's like,
absolutely, it's perspective, isn't it? Now, wouldn't it be nice if I could have got that perspective without actually having to, live through the death of my parents? That would have been quite nice. It would have been nice to have perhaps had that a bit earlier. But now that I've got it, again, how lovely, perhaps, after the gift or the influence or whatever it is that they still have in my life every day is knowing that that they're helping me make those decisions.
By growing this entrepreneurial part of you, what's been the trade-off? Have you then shrunk away from other parts of your life?
There have definitely been some bits that have taken a back seat. If anyone's watching this rather than listening to it, you may be astonished to know that I used to run marathons. I no longer run marathons. I used to spend hours and hours and hours out on the road. That was my meditation. No headphones, no music. It was just the sound of feet on the ground and your breathing, and that would be my thing. But if you're running long distances, it is hours and hours and hours out of, it would be, I'd be gone for long parts of the weekend. I'd be gone during the, sort of in the evenings or really early mornings. And a combination of things: hurt my foot whilst I was running the London Marathon, then took the business over, and then my dad died, and it all kind of went, so it all went a bit wrong. And I've never found the time, the opportunity, the willpower to want to try and come back to it. So that's a big portion of my life. I'm not going to lie, that kind of self-care portion of my life has definitely taken a bit of a back seat over the last couple of years, because I have been all in, taking a business that had been around for 16 years at the time, really successful, brilliant brand. I had a responsibility to that brand, but I also had to try and turn it into something that was mine.
Since owning your business over the last 3 years, can you pinpoint a decision you had to make where you thought, this is my coming of age?
I had to make the decision to transition Waddington Brown from being a recruitment agency that does some consultancy to being an HR consultancy. So when we talk to clients now, we're not talking about ourselves with these siloed services. We're talking to clients about holistic support. Now that's a big thing because Waddington Brown was always known as, we are the HR recruiters. We recruit for HR, that's what we do. And we happen to do some HR support. Very much now when we think about the way that we support our clients, we're coming at it from, it could be recruitment, it could be on-demand support, it could be training for your existing team, it could be, and that was a big shift because it had to fundamentally change the way that we thought of ourselves. And also the way that we position ourselves in the market as well. There's great HR agencies out there that are doing HR consultancy. There's great HR recruiters that solely recruit. We knew that our strength was that combined service, but that meant leaving behind some of the way that we had spoken about ourselves before. And I had to reconcile the fact that had been really successful and that had worked really well, and the people that, there's still lots of people involved in the business that were in the business, in the previous version of it. And it wasn't about saying that didn't work, but it was about saying this is how I want to really love the business and take it forward.
Is there a saying or a proverb that's carried you through some of these changes, Nina, that you can share with us?
The thing that we always talked about in my family, both my mum and my dad used to say it, was your life is like a plot of snow and tread carefully because every step will show. And
what does that mean for you?
For me, that's about accountability, that actually the choices that you make have consequences and responsibility. It's about personal responsibility. It's about choosing wisely. When I am feeling like I want to react rather than respond to something, I have to remember how that step might look, because the choices that we make have a lasting imprint. Where you work, the relationships that you have with your colleagues or with the people who work for you, the relationships you have with your friends, your children, your partner, whatever it might be. The choices that you make have lasting imprints, and you can't just wipe those away and hope that they all get forgotten. If someone looks at the choices I've made, have I not just what I do, but how I do it is really important to me. So yes, you can take a risk, you can say yes to something, but you can still put some sensible guardrails around that so that you're still doing the right things.
That's your guiding principles.
Yeah.
Nina Metson, thank you very much.
Thank you.